Good morning, friends and family, and you are all friends and family. I am Coach Jay, and I always start my class with a corny dad joke, and today's is this. A man walks into a pet store and asks for a dozen bees. The clerk carefully counts out 13 bees on the counter. That's one too many, says the customer. The clerk replies, that's a freebie. Ba-dum-bum. All right, if you can take 2 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, preferably with your eyes closed, but any way you feel safe. One more time. All right, today I'm going to be talking about anger, maybe even rage, and maybe tie it into sometimes how we have sometimes childhood trauma, and then we add adult trauma onto that and how we could really have rage. But everyone gets angry. Anger is a natural emotion that humanity has plenty of experience with. When expressed in healthy ways, anger is necessary to help us understand, set, and maintain our boundaries. Anger, like all emotions, serves the purpose of alerting us if we are in some type of distress. Although anger is uncomfortable mentally and physically, it does motivate us to address our needs, our desires, and our threats. However, unprocessed anger leads to many problems, short and long term. When anger or rage is expressed appropriately, the survivor of complex trauma, especially in childhood, feels relief, and their bodies and minds have a chance to heal. Researchers do estimate that about 3% of people living in the United States have experienced CPTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know how that number is so small because really the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms our coping mechanisms. And I believe there's a lot of things that overwhelm our coping mechanisms, especially in childhood, when we don't have the tools and resources to deal with certain things. So 3%, that's an awfully low number, but that's what the studies show. So as children, people experiencing CPTSD, and again, that's complex. I call it consistent because post-traumatic stress disorder is usually when one incident occurs, like, a bomb goes off and you see your friend, blown up. That's PTSD. CPTSD is complex, but I use consistent because it happens multiple times or over the course of a few times. So CPTSD could not, as children experiencing CPTSD, they could not express their emotions healthily, pushing anger and rage deep into their minds. Unfortunately, this anger and rage, when left unexpressed, follow people into adulthood where it turns into depression or many other health disorders, which makes healing from things that much more difficult and complex. So again, I know I'm talking about children a lot in this class, but when we have childhood trauma and then add that to any betrayal as adults, it really helps to understand, some of our foundation. That's why I'm just bringing this up for this class. For children living in a dysfunctional home, and again, dysfunction is on a spectrum. I mean, especially when a lot of our parents just learned how to be spouses and parents from their parents who, might not have had the best experience, or examples from their parents, things like that. So for children living in dysfunctional homes, it was frightening and perhaps dangerous to get angry or rage at your parents or caregivers, as it may bring on more abuse. You grow up with pent-up anger and rage that needs to be expressed. If we experience a betrayal in our adulthood, also having PTSD or CPTSD from our childhood, it's the perfect storm that creates a very long and complex healing process. It's not impossible, just more challenging. Anger is related to the fight or flight or freeze response of the activity of our sympathetic nervous system, and it prepares us to fight. Fighting doesn't just mean getting into a fist fight. Anger, when harnessed, can also motivate people to stand up against injustice. And there are many types of anger and rage. One of them is passive anger. This type of anger doesn't always exhibit as anger and is difficult to identify. When one experiences passive anger, your emotions are displayed as apathy, meanness, or sarcasm. You know, a lot of people use sarcasm. A lot of people use sarcasm. I was one of them, possibly still am. And really, that's a mask for a lot of anger. People exhibiting passive anger might look to others that you are intentionally sabotaging yourself, although they don't realize it. Then there's chronic anger. This kind of anger is prolonged and it can harm the immune system. Chronic anger is the root cause of many mental health disorders. Chronic anger is an extremely troubling emotional state where a person is dominated by their anger. And I'll tell you something, after a betrayal, this is often common. I mean, you are in a state of anger, profound anger and rage that could last a long time. I mean, it's almost scary sometimes how the intensity of your anger and the length of your anger could be after discovering a betrayal. This type of anger is prolonged and does not subside with time like other anger types and can cause major damage and significant impairment in daily life. A lot of unaddressed anger can eventually lead into depression, where you're just, it just takes the zest, the joy, the liveliness out of your life. You know what? I didn't pin myself. Hold on 1 second. I apologize. Lord have mercy. All right, self-inflicted anger. Self-inflicted anger is a kind of anger directed towards oneself, and it might be caused by guilt. So when internalized, anger can lead to survivors becoming self-critical and self-hating, even if they do not realize it. How many times, have you found that you're angry and one of the first things you do is, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I do A, B, and C? When self-inflicted anger reaches serious proportions, it can play a huge role in feeling depressed and worthless. Self-inflicted anger leads to self-defeating and self-destructive behaviors, including suicidality. A lot of times when I talk to people, they wind up like cutting themselves or having a lot of promiscuous sex. Their internal anger is just, there's a part of them that almost shuts down. They could become depressed, all kinds of stuff. There's overwhelming anger as well. Overwhelming anger is caused by life. This type of anger makes demands that are too heavy for a person. Overwhelming anger can lead to suicidal ideations or actions. Overwhelming anger usually happens after a discovery of infidelity. That's overwhelming anger. I hear all the time, and I've experienced, people get angry to the point where it scares them. They're like, I've never felt this much rage, this much profound anger. And one of the reasons I say this all the time is because infidelity hits us at our core insecurities. And so what happens when we feel insecure, to feel empowered, we oftentimes get angry, because angry gives us a sense of empowerment. But really what we have to understand, anger is just the bodyguard to sadness. Volatile anger. This kind of anger is characterized by spontaneous bouts of excessive violent anger. Volatile anger and rage is the most recognizable form of anger and is often a surprise to the person and to those around them. These are people that are quick to lash out, people with what I call psychological scarring. I tell people all the time, if I go up to you right now and pat you on the back and say, hey, how's life? You're like, hey, paying bills, going and thriving and surviving, blah, blah. But if you have a 3rd-degree burn on your back and I say, hey, how's life? I'm going to get a much different response. These are the people that are living in constant overwhelming anger. Most commonly found in males with substance abuse problems is overwhelming anger. Anyone can experience volatile anger. And like I said, it includes verbal outbursts, any property damage, physical violence, and emotional abuse. Again, these are people that feel powerless often, and so they have to use anger to make them feel powerful, which is interesting because, again, anger is just a bodyguard to sadness. So all somebody is showing when they get angry outbursts like this is how deeply sad they are. Justified anger. Anger or rage is caused by complex trauma. So justified anger is connected to responding properly to betrayal. This type of anger, while a person may feel angry, can lead to several mental and physical problems if not appropriately expressed. I say all the time, if people have long-term unaddressed anger, it's going to show up in other areas of your body. Initially, it'll show up maybe in some headaches, maybe some migraines. Then it shows up in colds and flus. And not to say if you have a cold and flu that you have anger issues, it's just that these emotions wear down your immune system. Then we start finding out that significant health problems have been attributed to stress linked to anger. So, I mean, unaddressed anger is not a joke. The frequency and duration plus the intensity of anger are certainly problematic. Often, survivors find themselves being controlled by their anger and rage. If endured too frequently, anger can cause an enormous amount of physical damage. I was just saying that, including the lowering of survivors' immune response. I just mentioned that. Other negative physical effects of unmanaged or unaddressed anger can be anything from headaches to insomnia to depression, digestion problems, high blood pressure, skin problems, even a heart attack or stroke. While anger is a necessary emotion, it could negatively affect the health of a survivor, as there are psychological consequences to remaining angry. Now, let me just say this too, and this is just a side note. One of the things that I try to encourage people when I'm talking to them is, feelings are not facts. Don't get me wrong, your feelings and your emotions are just as real as anything, but be very careful that you try to be cognizant, not to say I am angry, because you're not angry. You're a beautiful, strong, calm, and collected human who's experiencing anger, who is currently feeling anger. When I tell my son and my daughter, go near the mirror and high five yourself, or go in the mirror and say, I am handsome, I am smart, I am worthy, I am this, that's what they are. And if we walk around all the time and say, oh, I'm so angry, I'm angry, those are affirmations you're giving and telling yourself. You're not angry, you're feeling anger, you're experiencing anger. So there is a difference. You don't want to morph into or evolve into a person who's constantly living in anger, like the Incredible Hulk. You're a beautiful, calm, collected, peaceful person currently experiencing whatever emotion it is you're experiencing. Anger that is everlasting and does not diminish over time is dangerous to a survivor's overall mental health. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is one condition that is enhanced by anger and rage. There are many other psychological conditions that are made worse and are formed because anger and rage. These can include, post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, feelings of fear, worry, frustration, numbness, difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions for oneself, nightmares, insomnia. I mean, the list goes on. Really getting a hold of your anger, which of course is addressing your sadness, is key and crucial to your overall peace of mind and health. The formation of a substance abuse disorder can also be a consequence of anger and rage. I mean, the term raging alcoholic, usually it's people that have an emotion, then start trying to deal with it a certain way through alcohol or something. So a lot of people are trying to address the alcohol when really they're ignoring the fact that underneath that alcohol is anger, and underneath that anger is sadness. The role of anger in healing from CPTSD. So the 5 stages of grief, maybe you've heard of these by, what was her name? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or something like that. Came across, she discovered that each person she met is grieving in the same manner, even if the grief was experienced differently, the 5 stages. So there was, denial, depression, anger, bargaining, and acceptance, which is what we also do after a betrayal. We're like, denial, bargaining, all these, we do the same thing after a betrayal. These are 5 stages. Each has its own characteristics and leads to people accepting their loss. While Elizabeth Kubler-Ross studied grief related to death, the 5 stages can also apply to healing after trauma caused from any reason, whether it's, betrayal or, what have you, childhood. Survivors of childhood and or adult trauma have been through much and lost on their childhood and their current life. I don't have to tell you, when you experience trauma, everything comes into question. Everything comes into question. What was real? What wasn't real? Wait, when they told me they were doing this, they were doing this. When they told me they loved me, were they true? When they told me they were going to the store, were they actually out meeting or texting somebody? Everything is questioned. Where's my worth? Where's my value? You question everything. As you can see in the list of the 5 stages, anger is a necessary part of the grieving process. So anger is absolutely helpful. Anger is very helpful. It's a natural emotion. You should feel anger. It's just to the degree and how long you stay in it is what's healthy or not. So like I said, anger is a natural and normal response to childhood trauma, and it should never be avoided or trivialized. And something? Even if you have had those moments where you're screaming and you're pulling your hair and you're throwing a lamp across the room, devastatingly crying, that's fine and dandy. Have moments like that. Again, it's the length and time and to the degree you stay in that could be an issue. So while one does not want to remain angry for life, it is definitely understandable that a survivor who has experienced trauma does feel angry and should have a safe space to display that anger. Like I said, whether it's getting into your car and screaming at the top of your lungs, swearing, singing, belting out something, hitting a punching bag, you name it. If you're feeling a deep-seated anger because you are a survivor of trauma and live with CPTSD or PTSD from a betrayal, there's also PISD. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called post-infidelity stress disorder. Maybe I'll give a class on that at some point. But regardless, it all comes down to feeling betrayed and feeling very angry. It will definitely take guts, determination, and persistence, but we all can heal with time and work. Not with just time, with time and work. So don't let your anger lead to hatred, as you will hurt yourself more than you hurt the one who hurt you. And as Buddha is known for saying, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at somebody else. All it really does is wind up burning you.